Welcome to another video. This one is concerned with the martial archetypes of the fighter class from Xanathar's Guide to Everything in Fantasy Grounds. So we have created our 20th level fighter, and if we pop into the Actions tab, we see we've already filled in some parts of the Arcane Archer. Now we have created a power group for the Arcane Archer, and we've also created a separate power group for the Arcane Shot, and we'll see why later on. We did this simply by just dragging these features and dropping them into the Actions tab. We haven't included some of the other ones, and we'll see why later on. One thing I wanted to point out to you before we continue on is when we dragged in the Arcane Shot, we got this. This actually happens if you drag in features into the Actions tab. Very often Fantasy Grounds will be able to work out what the effects should be and will automatically create them. However, in this instance, it's obviously it's what we would call a búrach in Scotland, so it's a bit messy, and we would need to tidy that up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause the video, and then I'm going to set up all the effects for the Arcane Archer, and then we'll look at them in some detail once I've done that. We have now added all the effects into our Arcane Archer. The reason we didn't add in Arcane Archer lore, for example, is this is simply a Theatre of the Mind ability. You choose a proficiency and you get a choice of a cantrip. And similarly, things like Carving Shot. This just allows you to re-roll an attack against another target. And Ever Ready Shot just allows you to gain or regain a use of Arcane Shot. So the only two that we can set up effects for are Magic Arrow and Arcane Shot. So let's do Magic Arrow first, since it's the easiest one. This simply allows the user to add the magic damage type to any arrow that they fire, or any non-magical arrow that they fire. So all we're doing here is adding in the damage type magic. We've set the targeting to self and expending on next action. So this effect just gets added to the character. They take their shot, and once damage is done, this will remove, and that's that. So we now come to the Arcane Shot. The reason why we have given this its own power group is two reasons, and they're both found if we open up the power group dialog. The first is that all of these abilities, or some of these abilities, require saving throws or force saving throws. And the ability is intelligence, so it's not the usual ability that you would find on a fighter that would be used. It's intelligence, so we need to set that to intelligence for this power group so that the difficulty class for the saving throws are correct. And the other thing is we only get two uses, no matter how many of these that we have available. We only get two uses per short or long rest. So we have added in the two uses here, set this to rest, and this gives us our buttons down the left hand side of each of these abilities, and when we mark one off, they all get greyed out, and then when we mark the second one off, they will disappear. And when we take a long rest or a short rest, they will all come back. So that's why we've given this its own power group, and also because it makes or it enables us to place each of these in its own separate line. So let's have a look at them in alphabetical order as it's shown here. So the first one is Banishing Shot, and again we've got all these clicked here so that we can see what it's all about. So Banishing Shot Right, abjuration magic. The target must succeed on a charisma saving throw, and they get banished for a turn, and during this time they're incapacitated. So we need 3 effects for this one. The first is the saving throw itself, so that's just a straightforward saving throw. The charisma type is typed in here, and because we've set the intelligence up here, then we can use the group DC. We don't need any half damage on save. Simple enough. And then we have an effect of incapacitated, which is placed on the target and lasts 1 round. And if we're 18th level of higher, we also get 2d6 force damage. So we've got an effect here which will add in the force damage. This is set to self and expend on next action. So our archer is going to apply this effect to themselves, and then they are going to do damage with their bow as normal, and this will get added into the shot. Now, a lot of these effects add in extra damage, and they're all pretty much exactly the same. They are all set to self, and they all expend on next action. So in all cases, the archer applies this damage or applies this effect to themselves, and then takes their normal damage roll, and this will just get automatically added in with the correct damage type into the damage. Now, the one thing that we will need to finesse here is the timing of the effect when the effect drops off, because in this instance the incapacitated effect drops off at the end of the target's turn, and not as you would normally expect to find the fighter's turn. So let's have a look how we might do this. We've got the combat tracker here, we've got our fighter who's got initiative of 10, and we've got 3 orcs with different initiative values. So let's suppose our fighter decides to target Orc 2, and the Orc has failed its saving throw, so our fighter is placing the incapacitated effect onto Orc 2. If we open up our Dungeon Master, we'll need to do this, opens up the effects dialog here and the combat tracker. You'll see that in this box the initiative to adjust on is 10, which is the initiative of the fighter. We don't want this effect to be removed on initiative count 10. We need it removed at the end of our Orc's turn. Our Orc is currently on initiative 5, so in here we need to put a figure of less than 5, because initiative goes from highest to lowest. So let's suppose we put a figure in here of 4.9. And now, as soon as the Orc 2's turn has finished, this effect will be removed. So we can test that out. The effect is still on. The effect is still there, but when the Orc ends its turn, the effect has been removed. So you'll need to finesse the initiative to adjust on for this particular effect. So let's have a look at Beguiling Arrow then. This gives the target some extra damage, or inflicts extra damage on the target, so we've set up the usual effect for that, set to self and on next action. The target can then make a saving throw, a wisdom saving throw, which we've set up here, and if it fails, you pick an ally, and the target is charmed by that ally. So we've got the charmed effect. You'll just have to remember who has charmed it. There isn't really a way that you can indicate who has charmed it, unless you were to adjust this or effect here by adding in the name of the character who's charmed it. So if, for example, we'd chosen Christian, you could do something like this. Put in the semicolon, and then just leave the charmed part in there. Whether or not it's worthwhile doing that or not, I don't know. At any rate, that's the Beguiling Arrow. Moving on now to Bursting Arrow. This one affects any creature, including the target, that's within 10 feet when the arrow strikes. So again, well, what we've done with this one is we haven't added this one in as a damage to self because it could have more than one target. So the way we would work this one would be to roll all the damage against the target, and then we would need to decide how many targets were in the 10-foot radius, select all those as targets, and then just simply apply the force damage to it using this effect. Enfeebling Arrow does necrotic damage, and then the target must make a Constitution saving throw, and if it fails, its weapon attacks or damage dealt by its weapon attacks are halved till the start of your next turn. So we've got the effect here to add the damage as usual. We've got the saving throw, and we've got an effect here which is just simply a descriptor, damage halved. We've got the duration and the targets. So the only way we can work this is that if it's our fighter's go again and he's targeted Orc 2, he's just going to place this effect on Orc 2, and this is just simply a reminder that this is the case. So if it comes round to Orc 2's turn and he decides to do some damage to someone, the best method of dealing with this would be to go to the modifiers tab, plus minus here, click on half, and then when we deal damage, you can see down here that the damage has been halved. The roll was 11, but only 5 has been applied. There's no effect that we can set up that would deal with that. Then we've got Grasping Arrow. This one does poison damage initially, and then the target will take additional slashing damage if it moves. So we've set up our poison damage just as an action, and expending on the next action applied to self. And then we've got this effect here, takes damage on move. So again, this is just applied to the target as a reminder, and if the target should move during its turn, then the fighter can just simply drag this extra slashing damage and drop it on the target. And that's how you would do this. You could use the ongoing damage effect, but that's not strictly correct because that would come off the target at the beginning of each of its turns, and that's not what the effect actually is saying, or that's not what the ability is saying. And this damage on move thing will last for a minute. We then have the Piercing Arrow, and there's no attack roll in this, it's just simply the creature gets or everything in the line, the 30-foot line, will take damage on a failed saving throw. So this one here is a little bit tricky because it says on a successful save the target takes half as much damage. So it takes the damage from your normal attack, plus it takes an extra d6. So if the Orc, for example, again we've got, let's take it up to Xanathar's Fighter. Let's remove some of these other effects. If we've got our Xanathar Fighter and he decides to attack Orc 2 again, and he forces a saving throw on Orc 2 and Orc 2 fails, then it's going to take the normal damage of his bow, plus he's going to take this extra 1d6. Now, if we apply this effect, so we've got the effect on there, and even if this Orc has failed its saving throw, when we double click our longbow, this damage will override it. It's because this isn't damage which is following a saving throw, all the damage will be applied. So again, we'll need to use our modifiers tab in order to halve the damage should the Orc succeed in its save. So we will apply this extra piercing damage, we will click on the half, and then we will make the normal roll, and as you can see, the damage has been halved. So again, that's how you'd apply that. You can't do a normal attack or do normal damage following a saving throw. It's the damage has to apply or have to be part of the saving throw, and in this case there's a separation between the saving throw and the damage which is being dealt. Seeking Arrow. This is another one of these where the creature needs to make a saving throw, and if it fails, then it takes additional damage in addition to the normal piercing damage, and there's a Theatre of the Mind thing where you can find the current target location. But other than that, it's a straightforward one. And finally, we've got Shadow Arrow. The creature takes extra psychic damage and then must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or be unable to see anything further than 5 feet. So we've set up the damage effect, and we've also set this up effect, can't see beyond 5 feet. And I've added in blinded here. Now this is up to you whether you would want to do this, because technically the creature isn't blinded. It can only see, it can still see within 5 feet. So therefore I take that to mean that it would still be able to see a target that is right beside it. If, however, it had no targets, then the blinded effect would be appropriate, because it would give this creature disadvantage on any attack rolls, and it would give other creatures advantage on attacks against it. But the blinded condition could be left off of this and just have the can't see beyond 5 feet. You could technically you could separate these two effects and put the blinded as a separate effect and apply it if the creature was attacked or made an attack during that time. Up to you to how you want to do that one. Now in all of these cases, when the warrior gets to 18th level, the extra damage dealt in every case is doubled, basically. So if it was 2d6, it'll go to 4d6. If it was 1d6, it'll go to 2d6. I've just left these as these damages would be incorrect for a 20th level fighter, but it's just to give you an idea of what the effects are anyway. Okay, so that's the Arcane Archer. I'll now pause the video again and set up the effects for the Cavalier. Okay, we have added in the Cavalier effects now. Not all of the abilities are here. The bonus proficiency, for example, there's no effect that we can set up for that. That's dealt with elsewhere in the character sheet. And things like Vigilant Defender is a Theatre of the Mind thing, and as is Hold the Line. So these haven't been added in. There's no effects that we can set up for these in any way. So the first one we want to look at is Born to the Saddle. And all this does, or all we can set up an effect here, is advantage on saving throws made to avoid falling off your mount. So we've just simply added an advantage to save action effect, which disappears on the next action and applies to self. This would be equivalent to just clicking the ADV button before you make the save, so whether it's worth applying the effect or not, it's up to you, but there it is. And then we've got the Unwavering Mark. A bit more complex, this one. Essentially, if you've got something or an enemy within 5 feet of you, you mark that enemy, and if that enemy then makes any kind of attack that isn't against you, they have disadvantage on the attack roll. So that's the first part. So what we've done here is we've set up two effects to cover this, and the first is simply an effect called Protected. And this effect would be placed on all of the fighter's allies. And then the second effect checks using the if target and the custom function to see whether or not the target of the attack is going to be protected or has a protected tag on it, and if it has, then we're going to give that disadvantage to the attack roll. So let's have a look at this in operation so we can see how it works. We've got our fighter, and he's decided to use his unwavering mark. So he's going to target all of his allies, and then he's going to put the protected effect onto his allies. He's then going to clear all that, and then he's going to target Orc 2, and he's going to put this effect onto Orc 2. So what will happen now is that if Orc 2 should attack any ally, you can see that it's rolling at disadvantage. If we attack Deneric, again it's at disadvantage, but if the Orc attacks the fighter, he makes a normal roll. Similarly, any other orcs that make any attacks are not they're not affected by any of this. So if this orc attacks Arani, then he does so normally as well. So that's the first part. So the second part of Unwavering Mark is that if the target does make an attack against a protected target, then the fighter gets to make a special attack with advantage and adds in damage equal to half his level, or half the fighter level. So these two effects will cover this. The first just simply being an advantage to attack, target itself on next action. This would be equally easily done by just clicking the ADV button before making the attack. And the second part adds in the damage for half level. Again, set to self and on next action. Now the problem with this effect here is that this is half the character's level and not the fighter level. So this will work perfectly well if we have a straight fighter, but if we've multi-classed, then we need to adjust this to the actual number of half the fighter level part of the multi-class character. It's potentially possible to do it by adding another effect using the damage dialogue. We can, if we add another line to this, we can take the stat here and make the stat fighter. Now this is still the fighter's level, so we need to reduce that, and we can do that using this bonus box here. If our fighter is level 20, if we put in a -10 into this bonus box, then that would give us the correct level, i.e. half the fighter's level. We'd also need to give this a damage type though, and the type would obviously depend on the weapon that the fighter was using. And if they use multiple weapons, then you'd have to come in here and alter this dialogue every time they made a hit. So I don't think it's really worth doing it this way, but it is possible if you wanted to do it in that way. And the final one in this suite is the warding maneuver. This is another it's another one which is difficult to set up effects for, but what happens is that if a creature you can see is hit by an attack, you can roll a 1d8 and you can add this result to the target's armor class against the attack. And if the attack still hits, then the target has resistance against the attack's damage. Now, there isn't really a way that we can set this up, because armor class one of these effects which can't take a dice string. It can only take a number. So we have set this up with an AC of 1. You could come in and alter this to whatever the dice roll was, and then apply it to the target, and it would work that way. It's probably easiest to just do this bit manually. Have the enemy roll their attack without a target. Then the fighter would roll his d8, and you'd have to work out manually whether it was a hit or a miss. The second part, however, we can do an effect for that, because the target will get resistance to all the attack's damage if the attack still hits. So we can just have a resist all effect. set to targets, and expiring on next action. Okay, so that is oh, and one other thing is that this warding maneuver has a limited number of uses. It can only be used equal to your Constitution modifier. So we've gone into the preparation mode. We've assumed that the bonus for the Constitution here is 2. We've given it 2 uses daily. And that gives us the tick boxes which we can tick off, and they will reappear on a long rest. Right, that's it for the Cavalier. Another pause and we'll come back and look at the Samurai. Okay, we've entered all the effects for the Samurai. Once again, several of these are dealt with elsewhere or are theatre of the mind, and no effects can be set up for them. Bonus proficiency is obviously dealt with elsewhere. You can see Timeless Spirit, that's another one which you can't set up an effect for it, and Strength Before Death is the same. So the ones that we can set up effects for, we'll look at Fighting Spirit first of all. You basically give yourself advantage on a weapon attack until the end of your next or your current turn, and you also get 5 temporary hit points. So fairly straightforward. We just have an advantage to attack, self expending on next action, pretty much the same as just clicking the ADV button. And also we've got the heal. We should set that to self, and 5 temporary hit points. So that would just get applied, and essentially that's it. Again, I've used 5 here, but at 15th level it would be 15, so it would increase. And the other important thing here is that you only have 3 uses per long rest, so we've gone into preparation mode and we've set this to 3 daily to so that we can track the number of uses. So that's that's Fighting Spirit. Elegant Courtier. This essentially gives you your Wisdom modifier to persuasion checks. I've set up an effect for it, but it can just as easily be done in the skills by adding the bonus in there. But anyway, there is an effect you can set up for this using the special Wiz tag here in square brackets, and then the persuasion, and adding it to self. And if we apply this, you can see that the bit in brackets translates into the bonus that the fighter has for his wisdom. Well, we've given him a wisdom of 12 for this purpose, so that you can see the +1. If we'd left it at 10, then this would be 0 basically. It wouldn't show a number. So now if the fighter makes a skill check, then they'll get that additional bonus to the persuasion checks. But as I say, it can equally be as well just putting the bonus into the miscellaneous box here. The one benefit of doing it this way is that if the wisdom changes, then this will change with it. Okay, that's Elegant Courtier, and the other one is a Rapid Strike. And again, this is another one that just gives an advantage to an attack roll. And you can then make additional attacks. So it's a simple advantage attack, and again that could easily be dealt with using the ADV button. So that is the Fighter Archetypes for Xanathar. Been a bit of a longish video, this one, but there's been a lot to get through. So hopefully this has been useful, and we'll see you in the next one if you're watching. Bye for now.